But I was thinking about a passage from Ecclesiastes because I did grow up in the church. And so I was thinking about today about Ecclesiastes 3. And specifically, that's where the author of Ecclesiastes is writing about there's a time for everything. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the whole thing. Ecclesiastes 3 in the New International Version. There's a time for everything, a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear down and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Now, obviously, that relates to Ukraine very much because there's a lot of people saying, no war, we need peace. They need to, capitulate and surrender and give up their land just so we can get some peace. I'd fucking argue no. I'd say no, absolutely not. There is a time for war, and that is when you're being fucking attacked for no goddamn reason, just like the Ukrainians are. And I think it's perfectly fine, perfectly legitimate, and no matter what your religious views are, even if you are Christian, as most Ukrainians are, I think clearly in the Bible, there's a time for war. There's a time to kill. There's a time to hate. And I think that is that time right now. And I think it's perfectly legitimate and fine. And there is nothing shameful about Ukrainians trying to kick Russia the fuck out of Ukraine. That's my honest opinion. And, I know there's people who disagree. I have argued with people who disagree quite a bit. I'll probably try and make a more articulate video along those lines to really kind of break down those arguments and why I think I'm right. But tonight, it's just like I was just thinking about, this Bible verse just popped back into my head after not thinking about it for years. And it's like, yeah, there is a time for war. There is a time to hate. And there's a time to kill. And that's okay. And that is part of the human experience. The human experience, we would love it to all be nice and pleasant and peace and roses and hippies and all that. But it's not. The human experience is much more convoluted, much messier. It can be much darker, much less pleasant. I don't necessarily want to feel that. Like I'm somebody, I'd love it if, there's a time for peace and there's a time for peace. There's a time for love and a time for love. That would be great. And I would love if as a human species we could evolve to that point. But we are obviously not there yet. We would love to believe that we are there as a human species. We would love to believe it's 2022, these big land wars like that don't happen in Europe. But clearly they do. Clearly some of the human race is not over killing other people for no goddamn reason. But yeah, I just really wanted to share. I think it's fine if there's a time to hate. There's a time for war. There is a time to kill. And eventually, there will be a time for healing. But that's not right now. That's not while Russians are holding the Kherson region. That's not while Russians are holding Mariupol. That's not while Russians are still in the Donbass. That's not while Russians hold Crimea. Once that's all back in Ukrainian hands, then we can talk about peace and healing. But not until then. It's my belief, that is the belief of most Ukrainians, and it is what it is. And I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm the kind of person who, if somebody tends to have a negative opinion of my opinion or something, my gut reaction is to be like, oh, maybe I'm wrong. And I don't think that that's necessarily bad in a sense. I think it's good to evaluate your positions. It's good to not just assume that you're always right. But in this case, I've thought about it. I've seen what Russia has done. I've heard many firsthand accounts from people that I know and love and trust of what Russia's doing, as well as from many, many different news sources and from other Ukrainians on the ground. I know what's happening. I don't believe for 1 second the Russian propaganda bullshit. Nobody's going to change my mind on that. So I'm always going to be pro-Ukrainian, and that is just what it is. And that's really kind of what I wanted to say. Let me know your thoughts below. Am I completely wrong that there's a time for war and a time for hate and a time to kill? Let me know.